I know what you guys are thinking. What on earth could be a bigger threat to the sports card hobby and the sports card market than scammers?
Right to unsolved mysteries.
Well, I've got the answers for you, friends. And while those clickbaity scammer titles or big fraud or whatever, I kind of wonder if we're getting a little bit too oversaturated with it to where people are just like, it's another homicide. It's another car accident. It's whatever. I'm kidding. Actually, I really like those videos because nothing is worse than these dorks that actually try to scam on a live break. You're actually live on camera. It's recorded, and they still manage to try to dip a card or do something stupid. So keep those videos coming. But we are going to talk about a different threat today. Before we get started, huge shout out to today's video sponsor, VeriSwap. Make sure to verify your swaps, your trades through the VeriSwap app. I will have a link in the video description as well as in the pinned comments to take you there. And essentially, these guys are going to verify that the trade that you guys have come up with, cash, cards, all of the above, whatever, is all good to make sure that we're all safe and not doing deals in back alleys. So check out VeriSwap today. All right, friends, I have gathered information from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, not to be confused with the fake foundation that tried to authenticate game-used Jordan jerseys. Not that one. They opine on U.S. national debt. $33 trillion of debt in the United States, $1.8 billion a day in interest. You think your credit card interest is bad. $1.8 billion a day. Also, remember that too when you hear in the news, if you watch it, I really don't watch it anymore, but U.S. wasted $20 billion or can't find this $10 billion. Well, that's 5 days of interest. So just keep that in mind when you hear those headlines. This is one part of the equation that we're going to talk about today. And you might be saying, like, what does this have to do with cards? Stay with me, stick around, hang in there, hang in there. So what we have learned, though, is regardless of who is in office, so I want to say this right out of the gate because I know it'll spur a lot of Bidenomics and Trump tax cuts and Bill Clinton and George W.'s Iraq war and all the rest of that. I totally get it. Everyone's got their opinions and they're valid. Don't want to discount anyone's opinions there. But I think what we've actually seen, the facts are that both sides of the aisle, they love to spend. All of these folks are in here. They are just spending the money. As soon as they get more in, they just keep on spending. We keep on what? We keep on pushing the debt ceiling up, and there's always this big back and forth. Are we going to shut down the government? It never happens. They keep on pushing the debt ceiling up. Spending, spending, spending. And so here's the thing is a lot of people say, oh, just raise taxes. Raise taxes, and then we can cover all this stuff. As opposed to reducing spending, raise taxes. And that will help, right? But here's the problem. Let's say the government said 90% tax rate for everybody in the U.S. 90%. Everyone pays 90%, so we're all left with crumbs. Do we feel confident that the U.S. government would take that money and spend it in a wise way, pay down the debt, and get us back to a place where we are all good and everything is fine? Do you think that would actually happen? I actually think we would be living in squalor and there would be like crystal covered roads outside, like bridges made of 24 karat gold. Just the dumbest spending you probably ever heard of. I think that's the bigger issue here is even if we raise more money, because that's the thing here is basically the reason why we have a deficit is we're not taking in enough tax dollars to pay for all the promises, okay? That's the bottom line. And then over time, it's built up to where it is. All the promises, spending, and we're not taking in enough. So again, people say, hey, well, maybe we try to reduce spending, raise taxes. But again, if we raise taxes, they'll just find new ways to spend the money. That's the problem. They're just regardless of what side of the aisle you're for, doesn't even matter. They will find new ways to spend this money. On the flip side of that, the Federal Reserve is trying to balance the fact that policy was, hey, we're going to spew out all the stimulus. And now, oh my gosh, what a shock. We have massive inflation. Who would have thought that was ever going to happen? What a complete shock. So now the federal fund rate up to 5.25%, 5.5%. There's talk here, and I've heard a lot of different folks talking about how they're going to ease on the rate increases. They're going to hold steady for a little bit. They're going to hold steady, maybe one more increase, maybe not, because they want to see inflation come down to 2%. But here's the problem, though, is that what if it never gets down to 2%? Because as long as we hold the federal fund rate positive here, it's going to continue to have a negative effect on business, on borrowing. It's not going to be helpful for the economy. And then going back to our original point here, it's interest on our own debt. That $1.8 billion a day in interest, a lot of that is old debt. It's based on lower rates. Now all of a sudden, we're taking out these higher interest rates. It's like me going out and getting a 40% credit card right now. It's like I already have a credit card with 10% interest, but let's go get another one for 30% to just keep this thing going. It's like saying like, oh man, I make $100,000 a year, but if I made $200,000 a year, my life would be perfect. But then when I make $200,000 a year, I just spend $300,000 a year or whatever. And you guys, look, you can equate this to a household. It's the same damn thing, just on a much larger scale and more complex. And so back in 1980, what we did to combat inflation, of course, raise rates massively, 17 to 18% mortgage rates, if you can believe that. We're at like 7-8% mortgage rates, very, very high compared to what we've had over the last 20 years. They were at 17 to 18% going back to 1980 to combat inflation. But guess what our national debt was? $914 billion. And it actually moved up to $914 billion. It was at about $500 billion. So nothing to sneeze at, but it wasn't $33 trillion and climbing. And I keep on hearing this, whether we're talking about the sports card hobby or the economy or whatever, we're in uncharted waters. We're in a black swan event. We've all been listening to this over the last 3 years with the pandemic and with all the stimulus coming out and kind of all this wonky up and down, all this volatility. We've all been hearing this. We're in uncharted waters. That makes me incredibly nervous. And so I look at this video as, this is a threat to the sports card hobby. Possibly. We'll have a silver lining here at the end. So save yourself for the end. But of course, all this uncharted waters, black swan event talk basically is telling me that nobody's ever seen this before, which again drives me nuts when I hear sports card people or just economists or fake economists or whatever that pop up like, man, we've seen these hills and valleys before. We've seen this in the sports card hobby. No, the hell we haven't. We have not. We have not seen increases in prices like we did in 20 to 2021. And then of course, the inevitable drop from there. That has never happened in the history of cards and collectibles, period. And people can come out and say, oh, there was movement here in 2016 and there was movement here and what, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't the same type of movement on specific cards because they were being pumped for one reason or the other. I'm talking about the massive tidal wave that affected tons of cards, most new product, all that stuff that we saw over the last few years, and in which some of it is still too high. Look at look at the price of hobby boxes, and then look at what kind of value you get out of one. Yeah, they're way overpriced. They're way overpriced. So I know the doomsdayers will say like, hey, look, you need to make sure that you have enough canned goods. You've got the bunker all set up in the backyard. We're all going to be blah, 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 whatever. And that's fine. Honestly, I don't think it's a bad thing to over-prepare. That's not me. I've got some canned goods downstairs in the pantry, but I don't have a whole bunker full of stuff. I'm not ready like that ready. But at the same time, I do understand why people are looking at this like, man, I don't trust this at all. I don't think it's a bad thing to be saving as much as you can. But obviously, we don't know how this thing's going to land. I kind of hope that they just get used to the fact that we are going to have inflation. There's no way around it. I don't think we're going to hold at 2% inflation. We're probably going to have a little bit of a higher inflation, and that probably needs to be our new normal based on this new world that we're living in. We're just going to have to accept the fact that maybe we're paying an extra $1 for a carton of eggs, but we're keeping our jobs and maybe our wages are a little bit higher than what they were before. It's just going to be what it is. So I don't think there's any way around that. The silver lining here that I know everyone is waiting for is these stressful times, which to be honest, I think are going to kind of continue on. I think there's some more stress to come as far as the economy goes, is going to lead more and more people to these type of nostalgic collectibles, not so they can spend millions of dollars and thousands of dollars and this and that, but even if it's just small things to make them think of their childhood, to make them remember good times growing up. Because let's face it, as an adult, we've got all sorts of stresses. We've got all sorts of weird world events going on. There's all sorts of that pressure all the time. And this stuff around us is all the fun stuff that we can look at, and it just takes us away, even if it's for 10 seconds throughout the day, that kind of like just recharges the batteries a little bit and gives you a little bit of a dopamine rush. So I think that this is what could happen. I think that maybe there's not as many high-end buyers, that are coming into the space. Maybe they're being a little bit more careful. But I think there's just a lot of lower-end people, low to mid-end, that are just getting enjoyment out of just the specific players or cards or whatever, the sets that they like. I think that's really what it boils down to. So to me, I think that the hobby continues on. I obviously probably lose people, gain people. I don't see, even if there is really economic hardship coming, I think still people look at a card show to where they can inexpensively get in for $5. Sometimes they're even free. and go look at some cards, and that's a fun day for them. Maybe buy $5 or $10 of cards. Even if there's some pretty serious economic hardship, I think that's worth a Saturday for a lot of people. So I don't think it slows much down as far as the interest. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing. So let me know your thoughts. And again, I'm not interested in like the big political debate. It's more to do with just the overall economic sphere of things. Because again, like I said, both parties did this together. This is not in the United States. This isn't one side's fault or the other. They've each played their own part. Now, whether you think one did more damage or the other did more damage, that's between you. But there's no defending the fact that both parties have done this, have created this for us, and we don't know how it's going to end. Again, it's one of these black swan events where there is no historical context, at least here in the US. All right, guys, stay healthy, stay awesome, and don't forget to check out VeriSwap, link below.